They said I would feel better once I forgot. Not all at once, of course, just little things, memories that made the hands shake, names that curled the edges of my dreams. They called it self-cleaning, a gentle correction. But I knew from the very beginning that the moment I let them inside, I'd lose more than I was willing to admit. It started with a paper, just a simple form. I remember holding the pen longer than I should have, as if my hand knew what my mind refused to say out loud. Consent to memory suppression. That's what it was titled. Bold, sterile, final. The man across the table didn't blink when I signed it, just nodded slowly, tucked it into a folder stamped Class D, and said, "You'll be someone better when this is over." Someone better? I should have asked what that meant. They took me to a place underground. No clocks, no windows. I noticed that everyone there walked without looking at each other, like guilt had weight and they carried it in their necks. The hallway buzzed with a low-frequency hum, so faint you couldn't tell if it came from the lights or your own skull. My room had no locks. It didn't need them. The walls were padded with silence, not foam. Every sound I made died before it reached the corners. I began speaking to myself in the mirror just to hear something respond. I thought I'd be prepared. I had read the research, after all. I helped write parts of it. But understanding the process and enduring it were two separate things. They told me that. I ignored them. The first night I woke up with a bloody nose and no memory of dreaming. That's when I realized the procedure had already begun. No warning, no countdown, just decay. By the third day, I couldn't recall my mother's face, not the shape of her eyes, not the sound of her voice. It was like trying to remember a language I'd never spoken. And worst of all, I didn't care. I stared at the blankness and felt nothing. That's when I knew it was working. They brought in a machine. They called it the Whisper. I remember asking who came up with that name, and someone answered, "You did." I don't know if they were mocking me or telling the truth. Both felt equally disturbing. The Whisper didn't speak. It emitted pulses, sequences of tones and lights calibrated to bypass the cortex and speak directly to the subconscious. It didn't erase memories. It replaced them, quietly, cleanly. After each session, they handed me a photograph. The faces were always unfamiliar. They told me it was my family, my friends. Some of them looked afraid, others were smiling. I couldn't tell which ones were real. By the end of the week, they stopped using my name. They said I'd chosen a new one, though I couldn't remember what it was. I began writing it on the walls, over and over, a single word, sometimes in red ink, sometimes in something darker. I asked to leave once, just once. They said, "Leave where?" And I couldn't answer. That night, I looked in the mirror again. My reflection blinked before I did and smiled. I know that sounds impossible, but what scares me more is that part of me smiled back. I started hearing him on the fourth morning. At first I thought it was feedback, some mechanical artifact from the machine they called the Whisper, a crackle, a pulse. But it wasn't random. It followed rhythm, pattern, intent, and then it spoke. Not loudly, never loudly. It came like a thought that didn't belong to me, sliding beneath my own. "Do you remember who you were?" I laughed, or tried to. It came out dry, like dust. I hadn't spoken in hours, maybe days. They had taken the mirror away, said it was interfering. I didn't ask with what. Each session blurred the edges further. They would seat me in the observation chair, strap my wrists, not tight but firm, and turn on the console. The lights weren't bright, but my eyes stung every time they pulsed. White, red, white, yellow. Pause. Red. The tones would start low, almost melodic. Then there was the silence between them. That's when I heard the voice clearest. Always from behind the glass. The room had a window. You couldn't see in, only out. frosted on the other side, but I knew there were people behind it. I could feel their breath waiting to see if I would crack. Eventually, I stopped caring who they were. What bothered me was him, the one who spoke only when no one else could hear. He knew things I didn't remember telling anyone. "You failed the last subject," he said once. I clenched my fists, but the straps held. He continued, "But it wasn't your fault. He resisted the overwrite. He loved too much. That was your mistake." The machine clicked, the lights blinked. My eyes burned, but I remembered a boy, hands trembling, screaming when we tried to reset his emotional memory. He begged us not to erase her name. I don't remember who she was. Maybe I never knew, but I remember the sound, and I remember the silence after. I asked the staff once who was on the other side of the glass. They exchanged glances, then told me, "No one, it's soundproof." But I heard him again that night, closer, inside the room. "You volunteered," he said. "You needed to know what it felt like. You wanted to believe it was harmless." His voice had no accent, no pitch, just the shape of a thought-given sound. "You always thought guilt could be cured like infection." I didn't answer. I just let the tears run and hoped the room was dark enough to hide them. The next morning, the files were waiting. On my bed, unmarked folder, no name, no number. Inside, 4 photographs, 3 subjects. One was me. I don't remember the experiment, but there was a date, March 3rd, the same date I first dreamed of the black room, the one with no walls, no ceiling, just the hum. The photos were blurry, intentional, like the lens had captured something it wasn't allowed to see. In one of them, I was holding a clipboard. Smiling, the subject's face was pixelated. In another, the subject's head was bandaged. Tubes fed into his ears. The final photo was just a screen. Text read, "Cycle complete, memory purge, 87%. I held the photo until my fingers shook. I tried to remember the man in the bandages, but the harder I thought, the more I felt pressure in my skull, like something inside was pushing back. I dropped the folder. The door opened. No one stood there, just air. Then the voice again, "You weren't supposed to see those." And the door closed without sound. I stopped trusting what was real after that. They told me I would wake up clean, not just refreshed, clean, like a hard drive, wiped and reloaded. A new personality, no grief, no guilt, no noise. I asked what I'd be filled with, and they said, "Compliance." The phrase echoed as they prepared me for the next phase. No more flickers of light, no more subtle pulses. Now came direct input. They strapped a headset to my skull, 6 points of contact, each one burrowing into my skin with a cold kiss of metal. No anesthesia. They said it interfered with integration. I think they just liked to see the shiver in my jaw. The technician wouldn't look me in the eyes. I remember that. His name tag read Caleb, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the dial. "We're pushing deeper this time," he muttered. I asked, "What if something fights back?" He paused, then said, "It always does." They called it the overwrite. Not erasure, that would be too merciful. The overwrite floods the mind with preferred narratives, a new set of formative experiences carefully curated to eliminate doubt, resistance, empathy. I was to become my own subject now, a test of moral plasticity, a mind willing to shape itself. As the machine powered on, I was given a word: anchor. They told me to repeat it, to hold on to it no matter what I saw. They said it would remind me who I was, but by then I had already forgotten why I needed to remember. The machine hissed. I was submerged. What followed wasn't a dream, it was programmed memory. I was 6 years old. A dog barked in the yard. My father called me champ, except I never had a dog. My father never said that word in his life, but I could hear the tone. I could smell the grass. It was real in a way that defied doubt. They gave me a wife. Her name was Eleanor. We lived in a yellow house near the ocean. She made coffee in the morning, she wore glasses, and I loved her desperately, the kind of love that shakes you when it leaves. Except she wasn't real, just a string of visual cues and auditory fragments, a construct injected to test attachment resilience. On the 4th simulated year, she died. Car accident. I wept for days. They recorded everything. When I finally woke up, the machine buzzing down like an exhausted insect, I gasped. Not because I remembered her, but because I didn't. Her face was already fading, and my heart panicked like it had been left behind. I tried to speak. My mouth felt foreign. One of them asked, "Do you know your name?" I answered without thinking, "Dr. Harold Niles." But that isn't my name. I don't think it ever was. I asked to see the mirror. They refused, said it wasn't time yet. So I waited until the lights dimmed and snuck into the observation hallway. There was a pane of glass, reflective, on my side. I stood in front of it, and I smiled. But it wasn't my smile, it was the smile they gave me. Something in my eyes was missing. Not light, not soul, just weight, like someone had replaced my gaze with a photograph of what it used to be. I whispered the word they told me to remember. Anchor. It meant nothing now. Just sound. Just syllables left behind from a person they said was broken. And for the first time I wondered, maybe they were right. They didn't ask for permission the second time. They simply said, the procedure was approved. Like it had always been waiting. Like I had been walking toward it long before I knew how to say no. They said the trial was moving into its clinical validation phase. I asked what that meant, and they told me, "We'll be repeating the sequence, but this time you won't know you're part of it." I wanted to scream, I didn't. There's a point where fear no longer climbs, it sinks. They wheeled me into a different room this time. No chair, no cables, just a bed, a ceiling light and a thick industrial door that clicked shut like it had swallowed me whole. No mirrors, just white walls and a faint antiseptic sting in the air. For the first few hours, nothing happened. I was left with my thoughts, except they didn't feel like mine anymore. They looped. Eleanor died. She wore glasses. You're Harold. Anchor, anchor, anchor. The rhythm of insanity is repetition, not chaos. Then came the drip. A small IV tube inserted without words, cold fluid sliding into my veins. I asked what it was. No one answered, not even the voice behind the glass. Silence became the new method, and in that silence, I began to fracture, not violently, not dramatically. More like pages being torn from a book you can't stop reading. I would wake up facing the wall and forget why I was afraid of it. I would try to hum a song and realize I didn't know what music sounded like. Then I saw the boy again, not physically. In the room inside my head, the one with the humming walls. He was younger this time, bandages on his ears, mouth sewn shut with thread. Not real thread, but memory thread. Synthetic trauma planted to test reaction thresholds. I reached for him. He stepped back and whispered without lips, "You did this to me." I told them the next morning that I saw him. They said, "Residual guilt. The mind resists purification." I asked if that was a failure. They said, "No, it's data." That's all I was to them now. Not a subject, not a scientist, just a measurement of how far you can stretch a soul before it splits. One afternoon, they gave me clothes, a white shirt, black slacks, a clipboard. They told me, "There's someone you need to evaluate." I was escorted into another room, mirror glass, single chair, camera mounted on the wall. There was a man sitting at the table, eyes sunken, wrists raw. He looked at me with a flicker of recognition. Then he said, "You're late." I sat across from him. His voice was hoarse. "What day is it?" I looked down at the clipboard, blank pages. I looked up at the man again, and something cracked because I recognized him. It was me, not metaphorically, not symbolically. It was me, hair slightly longer, scar on the temple, but unmistakably my face, my eyes, before they took whatever they took. I turned to the mirror. I saw only one of us. They were testing recursive projection. They made me interrogate a memory of myself to see if I could identify with the fragment. I failed, because for a moment I couldn't tell which one of us was real. When I left the room, they took the clipboard back and said, "Subject responded well to identity bifurcation." I wanted to ask what that meant, but something in me already knew. I used to believe that silence was peace, that when the mind quieted, the body followed. But now I know silence isn't peace. It's what remains when everything meaningful has been scraped away. The echoes began shortly after the bifurcation test. Not sounds, but sensations, phantom thoughts, ideas that didn't start with me, emotions that didn't belong to my current self, but still burned through my chest like second-hand grief. They'd taken my memories, yes, but the feelings, they leaked through the cracks. Sometimes I'd be sitting alone and suddenly feel the urge to apologize intensely, urgently, but I didn't know to whom. Other times I would weep without knowing why, and worse than all of that, sometimes I felt nothing at all, just a vast unlit corridor where a person should have been. They said this was expected. Post-purge emotional bleed, they called it. The neural equivalent of a limb that had been amputated but still itched. I asked how long it would last. They didn't answer. They just handed me a name tag that read visitor. I wore it for days. They put me back into observation, this time not as a patient, but as an evaluator. They said I'd passed cognitive normalization thresholds, that I could now oversee lower-tier subjects. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. Maybe I thought I could find answers in someone else's unraveling. They assigned me to a young woman, subject Nadra 33. She trembled when she spoke, like her words might explode if she used too many at once. She said she dreamed of water, endless water, and a child calling her name from beneath the surface. I asked her the child's name. She said, "You should know. You're the one who erased it." I froze. She smiled, but not kindly. That night, I went back to my room and stared at the ceiling for hours. There was no mirror, but I didn't need one. I could feel the emptiness under my skin like pressure behind a sealed door. I began writing again, not journals, not memories, just single words etched into the floor with a metal button I pried off my coat. Eleanor, anchor, glass boy, visitor. Each one a piece of something I was no longer allowed to be. Eventually, I ran out of words. The staff asked if I was experiencing semantic drift. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I no longer trusted the voice inside my head. That I wasn't sure which parts of me were genuine and which were installed. They told me I had been integrated into the final phase. Cognitive overwrite completed. Personality stabilization, 94%. Only 6% left. 6% of me still resisting. They said, "Soon you'll be ready." I asked, "Ready for what?" The man smiled, and for the first time, I saw something behind his eyes that scared me. Pity. He said, "For replacement," and walked away. That night I dreamed of the boy again. This time I was the one with bandages. He stood over me with a clipboard and whispered, "You made yourself forget. You wanted this." I screamed in the dream. When I woke up, my hands were wet with something that smelled like bleach. The lights flickered, and the silence finally spoke, not with words, but with a memory that wasn't mine. A woman's voice saying, "If you're reading this, you didn't come back. If you've made it this far, then maybe some part of me still exists. A trace, a fragment, a whisper between the cracks they couldn't seal. I don't know my real name anymore. I don't know what I loved, who I hurt, or how many times I agreed to be rewritten. But I know this. There was a door they said I opened. There was a file I shouldn't have read. There was a version of me who screamed, "Stop!" and no one listened. Now I watch myself from inside this machine, my voice copied, my face smiling on command. And I wonder, if someone else finds this recording, if you're hearing these words, then please don't let them tell you you're better without your pain. Don't let them convince you that forgetting is healing, because when you forget who you are, someone else gets to decide.